trained as a microbiologist,
Huh.
and I started microbiology basically as a master's from University of Madras, and then PhD from Madison, Wisconsin, where I did PhD in medical microbiology and immunology, and then a postdoc from Einstein in New York. Interestingly enough, my starting from my PhD all the way to probably 2013, so that's about let me count, 85, 95, yeah, good 20 plus years, 25 years maybe, in tuberculosis research. So I started my PhD, was lucky enough to continue the same work, actually in the same infectious disease area, tuberculosis. Was recruited by Astra, came back to India in 95, joined Astra in Bangalore, which then became AstraZeneca. And I was one of the key persons in terms of setting up the TB research infrastructure in AZ. Continued my role till I exited AZ. So, which is very unusual for somebody joining industry to actually continue in the same, in fact, very specific disease area, which sometimes has become a limitation as well. I came out from AstraZeneca in 2013, then got together with a couple of other individuals, Anand Kumar and Shantanu Datta, and we put together Bugworks, officially formed Bugworks in 2014. And my role in Bugworks is I take care of all of the research activities. We're a drug discovery company, and my role, my official title is President R&D, but we are such a small unit, it's such a pompous title. But the fact is that what I do is I stitch together the various facets which actually go into building a drug. So there are multiple disciplines which come in, and I am more of a project leader, project manager role, which the role basically encompasses that I bring, different, whatever is required in order to make the journey of an innovator to a drug. And I work with people not only inside, what I've also done is I've stitched probably more than a dozen, external relationships, a couple of hospitals in Bangalore and various other groups in Bangalore and outside, which all feed in terms of different sets of data, which walks us through this journey. So that's my role in Bugworks. We started, interestingly, Cellworks was completely a simulation, a modeling company. And we were modeling bacterial physiology, and the output we had, in the case of infection, we had a partner like AstraZeneca where we could do, the lab testing.
Yeah.
But when we came out of Cellworks, we actually came with the idea that we need to build internally a little bit of the lab infrastructure because we no longer, won't be able to depend on. So that's why we moved into CCamp, and we started building. So there are about 10 people on the bench who are doing very front end, microbiology, molecular biology, and biochemistry. And also the other important transition that happened from Cellworks to Bugworks is that Cellworks, even today, is centrally a modeling company, which means its output is more in terms of guiding other things, right? Today they are in cancer, they're in predictive science, where they're looking at personalized healthcare, looking at different cancer mutations, and saying for this particular cancer type of mutations, these treatment options are available, and then they give that back to.
Right.
We changed that completely with moving to Bugworks. We said we'll become a white powder company. Our company will not stop with just modeling and simulation. We'll actually go 2 steps, 4 steps, 10 steps beyond that, and we actually will produce a product. And so we took a mandate in 2014 that we will become a discovery company, which is very different from the Cellworks mandate.
Right.
So that's in a nutshell Bugworks.
Right. So being in a startup, how does that compare? And being from industry, what was your experience starting a startup?
Yeah. Oh, it's a fantastic. It's a day and night difference. I can't even say day and night. It's probably 2 different planets. Big pharma industry, where I spent nearly 2 decades, had, there were fantastic things in terms of the access to infrastructure, no doubt about it. We, especially coming from a very large, MNC big pharma, we had access to state of the art, from an infrastructure point of view. Anything we conceive, we can do. There was nothing limiting for us. Budgets were never an issue, right? That was a luxury. But the big constraint was highly process driven, highly bureaucratic. Decision making was highly constrained, and decision making was several layers removed from the action, right? And so the big difference coming from the large company to a startup is the vibrancy in the startup, the closeness to where the action is. People who are actually this group, everybody here is also involved in the decision making. It is not removed several layers above. And so while some of the so-called quote-unquote advantages of infinite resources that we miss out of industry, I actually don't miss that, because that is a mirage. Because resources is only dependent on how quickly and effectively you can execute what you want to execute. So while you may have this is like, you go to a buffet, okay? The entire spread is there, but you're hypertensive, you're diabetic and everything. What good is there even if there's a big spread, right? That's kind of an analogy. So the startup environment for me is just a fantastic thing. And sometimes I ask myself, why didn't I do it earlier? Much earlier in my life. Never mind, that's water under the bridge. But today, it is the most exciting phase of my life. I've not had this amount of fun, and I had to go back to my grad school to actually recall where I had this amount of fun. It was all the way back to grad school. So you can see the difference.
And does your industry background help you?
Phenomenally. I mean, the industry background is a massive help. In fact, our success with Bugworks, yesterday, Shantanu was saying that, what it is, we acquired AstraZeneca is what he used. Why he said that? 50% of us are AZ, ex-AZ, right? And all of the senior staff is AZ. What we bring to the table is robustness, goal-oriented, and in terms of the rigor that comes into the science, right? It is not one-off things that we're looking for. It's actually consistency, and actually going really towards the goal, and the phenomenal data rigor that comes from industry. Because what we're doing here is not to placate a publication, which is a one-time occurrence and you get away with it. No offense meant, but when you're dealing with actually a product which you envisage is going to be used by millions of individuals, the data rigor that goes in, there is no compromise, because it is very punishing. It will fail, right? So that actually comes only from industry, where sometimes it can almost be a point of being repetitive and being very, very systematic, and you're actually, doing predictable things. However, you need that rigor, and that comes absolutely from industry experience. There's no comparison. So we are all so thankful for our background from AZ.
So what was the breakthrough understanding on which Bugworks is built?
Oh, absolutely. Our USP, I can say, is that, so we focused on gram-negative bacterial infections. And just to put it in perspective, the last novel mechanism which was discovered against a gram-negative was 1962. So it's the fluoroquinolone class. So there has been no novel mechanism discovered since 1962. There are many challenges. It's not like people have not put the effort. The genome era exploded as many targets as possible in terms of genetic essentiality, many high throughput screens, etc. One of the challenges that we've seen consistently over the years in translating enzyme level potency to actually antibacterial compounds is a problem of permeability and efflux in gram-negative bacteria. which is why there have been more successes against gram-positive bacteria. You have at least another 5 new classes which have emerged in the same period of time, where none have emerged against gram-negatives. So one of the breakthroughs for Bugworks is we looked at efflux pumps in a different way. So people have been looking at, can I block the pumps, right? Can I inhibit the pumps, which means I use something to suppress and then I get my other compound in and it will do its job. We looked at it very differently. We were fortunate enough that one of the classes of pumps, the crystal structure was known. It's been published. And a majority of chemical structures, small molecules actually, or secondary metabolites in the case of the bacterial life physiology, or inhibitors, they refluxed from the gram-negative cell through a subclass called ACR-AB Tolsi. It's part of what is called an R&D family. Okay, and this R&D family has many subclasses, but the major subclass is ACR, AB, and Tolsi. Tolsi is the pipe which sticks outside. It's like a tube which throws everything out. The ACRB sticks, which is facing inside the cytosol, which is where the selectivity comes in because it actually has substrate specificity. And then the ACRA is a protein which anchors in the transmembrane between the Tolsi and the ACRB. The ACRB is the business end of the molecule. And the ACRB crystal structure is available. So what we did was we did a screen where we start with things which are antibacterial in pump deficient strains. Okay? So the pumps have been knocked out, which means these compounds have something of a molecular target inside and can do its job. It can kill. The only reason it's not killing in the wild type is because the pumps are throwing it out. So we start with things with a screen where the pumps are knocked out. Then we take this, identify chemical structures which are effluxed specifically by the ACR-AB Tolsi mechanism, which means they are not touched by the other classes. The moment we identify that, then we actually use structural biology. People actually do structural biology for increasing binding affinity, right? We do the exact opposite.
Nice.
So we actually do the medchem to lose the binding affinity to the ACRB while retaining its binding to whatever its target. Because you can actually lose both simultaneously.
Right. Okay.
Right? Because you can make a generic thing where, simply by, for example, by increasing, hydrophilicity or something like that, you can basically lose but that's no good. You need to retain its business end, but you need to lose the binding. So that is where our USP is. We have been able to consistently do this with multiple chemical scaffolds, where what we call as dial out the binding to the pump while retaining the binding to its target. That is what differentiates Bugworks.
Okay. So you have had funding a lot from BIRAC.
Yes. In fact, we started our journey with BIRAC funding.
And you've also had funding from VCs in the past, but
we've not
for
had,
Bugworks.
we've had, okay, no, we very much still have funding. We have a mix of funding. We have a bunch of angel investors. We have one VC funding. We have one corporate funding, which is a company, which is Baxter Healthcare.
Okay.
Baxter Healthcare. So the terminologies are a little bit different, okay? And the way it's differentiated, that angels are basically high net worth individuals who in the kindness of their heart, who see something interesting and they basically take a bet on you. And okay.
So they don't take a lot of your company.
They take as much in terms of the proportionate to whatever your valuation to whatever the investment, that remains the same irrespective of who the investor is.
Okay.
Other than a grant. Grant agency does not take any percentage ownership.
So for big grants, there is no
the BIRAC
equity.
No equity with BIRAC, absolutely none. So that's the grant mechanism is actually completely non-equity based, non-dilutive funding. But the dilutive funding, irrespective of which basket it comes from, the principles remain the same. The percentage equity is commensurate to what we think is the value of the company to what money amount they put in. And so we've had angel investors, we've had one VC, and we've had one large corporation. Coming to the grants, DBT has been phenomenal for us because our initial, when we actually started Bugworks, I still talk about we are a PowerPoint company, basically, right? We had about a deck with very cute slides. We sold the fact that a bunch of us come from massive industry experience. We basically marketed that, and it was on paper, a PowerPoint, a promise, and BIRAC funded us. And so we've raised substantial funding. If you look at it, we've had one, two, three, four funds from DBT to a sum total of 72, 2.25 crores of funding, maybe 2 crores of funding from, which is extremely healthy funding directly from DBT. Now, this is our first angel. So we got DBT funding and we've got some amount of grant, but the first angel, high net worth individual, this individual has no connection to science, has no connection to this industry, but he's a high net worth individual in Bangalore. So we went and we got a 1 hour appointment in his office in Cunningham Road. So we went to his office. 1 hour meeting became 3.5 hour meeting because he was just so charged. He kept asking very, very fundamental baseline things, right? What is an antibiotic? Why are people dying of infection still? Why are there no vaccines? And very first order questions, right? It's almost like a childlike inquisitiveness. This meeting went off beautifully by hour, but we never thought, okay, it's a great meeting he had. So then a week later, he said, I want to come and meet you people. So the best place is, Anand, can I come over to your house? And we'll have coffee in your house. So I said, okay, wow, this man is organizing. So we came, and he came, and we had high tea, probably actually dinner that night. At the end of the meeting, he wrote a 1 crore check. This was the most amazing money we've ever received till this date. Because this, and he said it. He said, I would probably make, with a guarantee, 10x return for this money if I put it in real estate. I don't have any doubt. But I'll never get the nobility associated with it. Right? And he said, you guys are doing something, so remarkable at that time, which we actually is still a PowerPoint company. Okay? And he said, it's just amazing. It's a moonshot for me. I know for a fact that I give this 1 crore and I will not see 1 rupee back. But it's okay. For your sheer passion and energy and what you guys are embarking on, you get the check. That's where we started.
But from your angel, do you expect more than just money? Do you also expect connectivity and so on?
Yeah. Well,
so in this case, it looks more like a philanthropic gesture because the cause is a noble cause.
You're absolutely right. In fact, most angels are that way. Most angels actually stop there, and and I don't know what to say from an expectation, but I can tell you what the track record. The track record, we've probably had more than 15 angels, but I don't think anyone really has gone out of the way to say build a network for us, including one of the later stage angel was Kiran Mazumdar, who invested in the company, right? Sri Kumar is a huge angel investor for us. In fact, he's the largest single angel investor for us. He's put so much of his personal money into the company. We get anecdotal connects here and there, etc., but not in a very organized way. To be very honest, we do not have a very high expectation from that point of view because angels invariably are people who we've just stumbled upon. It's not like we've actively sourced them, right? They come to know about us and they just get warmed by the cause and say, boom, I'll put in money into it. VC, corporate investor, those are very different. There are clear, our objective to lock in because it is not on a personal, it's basically this is a business relationship. Clear expectation is that they build a network. So they have, really been a massive benefit in building networks.
And in terms of government agencies, there are some conditions that comes with the fund, right?
Yes,
Especially in the amount that you can pay yourself.
very true. In fact, no. In fact, for the government, from the government portion of the fund, we can pay zero to ourselves.
Isn't that a problem? Like for people, for example, if you start out after a PhD, if I were to start a company, what I don't have enough savings to.
Very true. In fact, so I think big is an exception. The first big grant that you get,
That's an individual grant.
it's an
almost.
individual grant almost, and you can take a salary out of it. The principal investigator can take a salary. But other instruments such as BIP and none of them allow salary for the PI.
Yeah.
You can pay salaries for your subordinates, but if you're a PI on the grant, you can't take salary out of it. Which I completely agree. Which is kind of the logic they have, and I've spoken about this, is that you're not solely dependent on only this instrument. They expect you to raise other funds. Because remember, none of this is 100%. So you say X, and they only give you a max of 50%. And they expect you to bring the matching 50%, right? And they expect in that matching 50% you pay for yourself.
Okay.
That's the logic.
Okay.
And the reason why the government does it is, I think it's basically for you to have a stake in it.
I mean, yeah, sure. I mean,
As
a
opposed
fire in
to-
the belly is a good objective.
Well, sometimes fire in the belly alone may not be enough, right? Is what they're saying. Because sometimes committing a money is a much more, quantifiable stake in the play. And that's probably where it differentiates from an academic grant, right? And where it's not my place to say what is correct or wrong. All I'm saying is there's a philosophy behind this. And the philosophy here is that basically it's like, this is you're building something, especially for profit objective, that put where your what do they say? Put your money where your mouth is, or something like that. Something like that. Some expression where basically put some stake in it. Right? I think that's the logic behind it. It can be very punishing for young entrepreneurs who are starting, but it also, I think, if you ask me, it actually can be beneficial, because what it does is it takes you out of the comfort zone. Because at the end of the day, grant money, remember, it's non-dilutive. You still own 100% of your company. This may sound very cliche, but there is no gain without pain. Which means you have to burn something. You have to burn something, right? So the grant money is free money. And so by putting that cap that you bring something on your table, I think it's a good thing if you want to be a successful entrepreneur. So I don't have a problem with that.
Does VC money also come with its own constraints?
It has its depends on, VC money, there it's all about the extent of ownership, right? So when the investor's ownership exceeds a certain percentage in the company, they become part of the board. See, what runs the company finally is the board of the company, right? No, actually almost nobody, including the grant agencies, are never bothered about the day-to-day operations. They never bother about that, right? They know that it's your headache. They're not going to interfere. What they want to basically make sure is the board, the governance, which means at the larger scheme of things, you're meeting your milestones, you're meeting your financial obligations, etc. That's the board. Investor, whether it's a VC or an individual investor or a company investment, when it starts exceeding a certain limit, typically when a particular investor starts creeping above 25% ownership of your company, they will be on the board of directors. Then they're an equal voting right now. So absolutely right. So is that a constraint? I don't know whether it's a constraint, but it's a structure. It can be a constraint because it depends on what type of the individual who happens to sit on the board. Now, if the individual, because the investor, is more financially oriented as opposed to technology, especially science-based, then that misalignment can become very, very suffocating because if very financially oriented person always driving to what's the bottom line, when is my return coming through, rather than actually bearing out the risk. So those are pluses and minuses. But the choice ultimately is yours, right? As much as the investor is studying you, you have to study the investor whether this is a worthwhile marriage, because it is a marriage. The biotech industry is very, very promising. There's more noise than substance, unfortunately. However, I think there's a lot of exciting things happening. And in fact, if you look at, okay, I'm going to segregate or rather compartmentalize a few things here, right? A large part of biotech, unfortunately, is still in terms of, in the name of biotech, it is still IT masquerading as biotech. What do I mean by that? App developers, right? Whether it is, I have an app for, it could be a healthcare related thing, but it's still an app, it's still an IT for me. That's not BT. But a lot of it, unfortunately, masquerading and eating into the pie where the investor money is there. I have a personal angst against that, because what happens is that no investor is fully knowledgeable about any area. It's not practical also, right? So at some point they're taking a risk. In today's world, an app builder, an investor easily understands that. So what happens? Investments get, diverted there, and they walk away with a lot, and that for me is a bit of a pain. So I park that aside. That for me is a masquerading as BT. It's not BT. The true biotechnology, a large part is actually getting into diagnostics area, which is very good. Actually, even more exciting for me is the area of stem cells, biologicals, right? Interventions, which I think is fantastic. When I say diagnostics, it's not just point of care diagnostics, but I'm talking of even imaging, all those aspects which are not necessarily point of care. But I think there's a lot happening in India, and because I now sit through a bunch of committees, and it is fascinating. At least the projects coming through. How many of them will succeed and ever make money is a different matter. But I think there's a lot of buzz and a lot of things happening in that area. A lot of people thinking about actually product solutions.
So how many jobs do you think are there now?
See, that's a tough one. It's never a high volume industry. Biotech will not be a high volume industry.
So, but this is a tough thing that people don't seem, because the kind of specialization and long-term skill development that you need. So why then have an undergraduate degree in biotech? Where are these kids going to go next?
Fantastic point. You picked another one of my big grievances. I think undergrad, it's a charade. It was what do you call it was an exploitation of a buzzword where who runs undergrad in this country? It's basically a lot of private institutions, right? The bulk of it is private institutions. Private institutions will run not because of any altruistic thing. It's basically, I see a market today. I see this is a buzz. I will fit anything under this name and run this program. That's what was done. It was in the name. There were so many literally fly-by-night operations with practically no lab infrastructure, which happened as a mask, which is a complete sham. So let's not even go there. So it's producing a large volume. Unfortunately, these guys, or fortunately, a large percentage of them
can get absorbed.
They get absorbed elsewhere.
Yeah.
They go into the IT services industry, which is fine. So coming back to the employment generation. So we have to understand there are only two sectors which will have very large volume. The service industry will have very large volume. The other industry which will have very large volume is, labor-intensive areas, right? Large manufacturing, which is labor-intensive areas. Biotechnology is neither. Biotechnology is not like information technology, and this is again a pain point for me. IT, PT, I hate when people say it in a sequence because they're not the same. They're just not, they're not even apples and oranges, this is apples and elephants. They're completely different. Why? Because IT industry in this country, the biggest success is because it's a service industry, right? IT today has cut into every aspect of our lives, and they are able to, and that's why the large volume, because they, from very high end to the very low end, there's IT embedding everything. And so this has generated huge volumes of jobs. Biotechnology will not creep like that into every aspect of our life. It is going to still be, certain aspects of our life, where there are medical interventions or food interventions, etc. It's going to happen. So, and there, where are we going to do servicing? It's not going to be high volume. So, employment can never be in that scale. So, employment is definitely going to be in a more like a traditional industry type. Given that, biotechnology employment is, I think if you ask me, the beauty of biotechnology, what it promises is that it is not going to be a few large players hiring very large volumes, but it is going to be multiple small players. Because there are actually that many solutions you can look at, right? And each one of them is, from a concept to a solution, it can actually be done with a very small entity. 100 to 500 people max, you can actually make a biotech product. So you don't need a 300,000 workforce. Even at the level of manufacturing. Even at the level of manufacturing, right? Very recently I was reading about the Scotch industry, the Scotch whiskey industry. The smallest of the Scotch labels, I think it's one of those Glens. It's only 3 people. And they still probably sell over, God knows how many gazillion barrels. But this is that type of niche industry. It is actually going to be a very large number of players, each one, with a small cohort group of people. Why is that? Simply because I think there are many problems that you can get your biotech interventions in. And it is best if these are actually done in smaller entities. To build a very large, a TCS equivalent is actually counterproductive. It will not solve the problem. So biotech, we need to think very differently. It's going to be multiple players, and many, which means so the workforce also, we are not talking of very large workforce who basically going in, turning in, in a machine line where I do my job, I don't know what is upfront or what is downstream. That is not going to happen. This is a workforce which is required to be fully embedded in the concept of the product. That's the biotech workforce. Which takes me to a different question in your thing. Is the undergrad program preparing ourselves? Absolutely not. Unfortunately.